Hi, this is my first real attempt with scripted videos, so I'm sorry if some of this sounds very unnatural. The script I have here is just a bunch of talking points mostly, and I'm making this video because I like Warframe. I have been playing it for 5 years now, 5, 6 years since 2016 actually, yeah, 5 years, and I've seen a lot of things happen to this game, a lot of reworks, a lot of changes happen. A lot of new interesting and unique warframes coming from digital extremes, creative councils, or whatever. But this warframe, the newest warframe to be released to the game is Yareli. And 10 points to whoever guesses who I'm cosplaying. At first, when Yareli released, I actually had some fun with her because she does have interesting and unique playstyle, mostly due to her controversial second ability, but we'll get to it later. And the more I played Yareli, the more I came to hate her. Like it was little thing after little thing, like a bug there, a little quirk of the ability there, maybe some collision problems over there. And overall, I regret spending the I think two form. I put two form on her, right? No, one form. I regret spending the one form I did on her. But this video is going to be two sections. The first one is going to be an overall analysis of Yareli, and the second half is going to be a rework I've been thinking of. I think that it's going, if it ever gets implemented, I think it's going to be a good thing for the whole game. But first, I start with a quick analysis of Yareli. She has, well, first her statistics. She has 100 base health, which is average, 150 shields, which is above average, and you will get a noticeable increase in survivability with redirection instead of vitality. 100 armor, which is average. 200 base energy, which is tied for highest in the game, and average spin speed. Her passive, you might have seen it, the little buff on the right by my health. It's critical flow. It increases her secondary crit chance by 200%. And needless to say, that is higher than even max prime pistol gambits. And Warframe is a game where you move a lot because it's a fast game. It is a looter shooter, it's a horde shooter, but it is also like a speedrun game in the non-endless missions. So having a buff for just moving around is basically no requirement at all. So let's talk about her first ability. Let me just summon the, I think, traditional at this point, universally accepted standard. The 100 level 100 corrupted heavy gunners. These guys have a lot of armor, a lot of health. They're pretty tough targets to deal with, and any good weapon or warframe should deal with these guys in a low time to kill. Spoiler alert, TRLE has a higher time to kill on these guys. So let's first talk about sea snares. And already this ability is a big problem. You spawn 5 bubbles with each cast. And if there are enemies in range, they will seek enemies. And they will stun them like this, in this Bastille-like state where they can shoot, they can do anything. And it has a pretty low duration. And if you can count them, I shot 5 bubbles. But in this case, only 4 enemies got hit, because if you saw right here on the wall, one of the bubbles straight up hit the wall and exploded. Because these things are very fragile for whatever reason. And I think Arctic Eximus bubbles still stop them. They don't blow them up, but I think they just stop them from moving. And if you're not in range, the bubbles just do nothing. Like, sure, they have a little secondary functionality where if an enemy does get sufficiently close to it, it will shoot to the enemy and stun them, but the range is so small that it is effectively a useless patch. And there is also a cap. So I think we have 10 bubbles, 15. Now watch what happens with the front patch. Instantly explodes. You can only have 15 bubbles at a time, well, floating around like this. If a bubble does catch an enemy, it does free up the slots, so you can cast more bubbles, which is, you know, basic. But I think that 15 as a cap in a horde shooter is pretty low. It used to be very, very slow, but it got buffed to actually be faster than yourself. Oh, and also it has a one weird quirk where the sea snares can actually grab liches and sisters. The duration is nerfed when it does that, but it does do a little bit of damage when the enemies are stunned. As you can see, the heavy gunners lost a little bit of health with my strength at 200%. So overall, this is not a damage power. This is a CC power, and CC is not very good in this game. So my verdict on this power is not worth casting. You might as well just replace it with something else. Now let's talk about this thing. This is Merulina, Yareli's big gimmick. It is an Exalted Cage Ride, and that is exactly as bad as you think. It is pretty cheap, and it is a source of damage reduction that stacks with the damage reduction on your shields. More specifically, 75% of the damage you take is redirected to Merulina's health pool that you can see on top of my ammo. And you cannot heal Merulina, but you can recast the power with full invincibility. You get status immunity, stagger immunity, knockdown immunity. And if you hold interact for whatever reason, you automatically hop off Merulina. Unlike cage drives, Merulina can double jump. And it can also recently added, it can dash. And the start of the dash, I think, resets all your downwards velocity. Well, not all of your downwards velocity, but it does help slow down the fall, which lets you go really far in more open world areas. The other benefit to being on Merulina is that some of the casts, I think her third and fourth abilities, force you to be stationary, but when you're on Merulina, you can keep moving. So you can keep your buffs, I guess. You can use transference like in normal cage drives, but it's for whatever reason not only dispels Merulina, but also does not seem to make Yareli invincible, as would normally be the case with Warframes that do not have an active power. Also, another problem that is just general to K drives, you can only use your secondary weapons when you're on them, which is personally a bad design decision, because secondary weapons these days are all very samey. And in most missions, your hitbox when you're on Merulina becomes way too large. So you start bumping on lots of things. For example, Yareli will bump her head and you stop dead in your tracks. And Merulina does have the capacity to put you in places where a Warframe could normally walk under, but at that point, you've killed all of your mobility. So my verdict on this power is sadly mandatory. Not very fun. Now let's talk about her third ability, and this is, I think, the one ability that has gotten the most buffs out of every ability. And it's also Yareli's Helmut ability, which she can give to other Warframes if you sacrifice one whole Warframe. And it's Aquablades. In particular, the things that got buffed is the radius has gotten a little bit bigger, the duration is significantly longer, and the damage is considerably higher. Like now, she not only can stagger these heavy gunners, and more commonly any sort of melee enemy that would try to approach her. She will also deal some damage on the side that can kill. It can kill, not very effectively, but it does kill. I think some of the weaker enemies and enemies without any armor, they will get shredded with a decent build. So this ability does have some merit as a damage ability. And even if it doesn't deal damage, it still staggers. So personally, I think that this ability has the same use case as Mesa's shooting gallery. Or whatever her 2 is called, I forget. I think it is shooting gallery. The sad part about this power is that it is unaffected by range. And that would probably be because the blades would be too far to protect Yareli from melee enemies. But I'll propose a simple solution right now. Just add a second, smaller set of blades near Yareli and make this ring that is currently present just scale with range, or even deal damage to all enemies that are inside the ring. Like maybe he thinks that's a bit too much for a power to do, but they still haven't nerfed Octavia since she was released. Nor have they expressed any problem with Peacemaker existing. So I don't think that adding either of those functionalities, or even both of them, would be too out of character for them. And now I'm gonna have to reset the spawns to demonstrate her fourth and final ability, which is Riptide. So it does this. It gathers all enemies that are in range under a single point, deals a little bit of damage over time to them, and then once the cast ends, it explodes, dealing damage that scales off the amount of enemies that are being held inside the range. And as you can plainly see with like 200% power strength, these heavy gunners level 100 barely took a hit, even when there is 20 of them, which is pretty bad for an ability whose sole, like half of its purpose is to deal damage, and it doesn't do that well at all. Nor does it do any cold procs, so you can have at least a little bit of lingering crowd control. Enemies that are far away don't get pulled as well. And for no good reason, this ability also has a 95% damage fall off, which is very out of place in a Warframe ability. This would be in place for something like a weapon. You know, this would make sense if you were using the Taunt or the Ogress, not when you're using an ultimate ability. So my verdict on this power is going to have to be the same as the Sea Snares verdict. It's just not worth using at all, ever. You can replace this very easily. In fact, you might want to replace Sea Snares more than you want to replace Riptide, because Riptide at least has that consistency that Sea Snares desperately lacks. And now, maybe you skipped to this part of the video, who knows? I don't know how you want to watch this. I'm just going to do a, let's see, what's a good emote I should do? Yeah, right now I'm just going to meditate right here, and I'm just going to list off some fixes that I want Yareli to have that will make her a whole lot better, in my opinion. None of these are purely statistical. There are actually mechanical differences in the things that I'm going to propose. First, passive stats, perfectly fine. I don't think they should be changed. They work with her playstyle very well. Now, regarding Sea Snares, there's some like basic stuff I want just added. You know, if you don't want to do any of the things I'm about to say, you can always just let us cast more bubbles, increase or remove the cap outright, add duration, give us some status chance, or even like a combo meter like you have for Rhino's first ability, so we can cast more bubbles at lower cost, because that's something I glossed over when I went over Sea Snares. Um, since you have to cast the ability at least 3 times to get its full functionality, so to speak, your effective energy cost is triple what you see on the stat screen. But now I'm going to propose, you know, the actual mechanical changes part. I want the Sea Snares to store any procs that go beyond cap. So what do I mean by this? Let's say you have an enemy that is affected by, say, 10 viral procs, and your weapon deals an 11th viral proc. Normally that would just refresh the duration, and I think it should still do that. But when the enemy is affected by Sea Snares, I want that 11th viral proc to be stored inside it. And what does that mean when the proc is stored? That means that, for example, when the enemy goes into, say, 9 viral procs, that extra viral proc that is stored will get applied. Or maybe I think it's not that the viral procs go down stack by stack. I think the whole thing just clears immediately, so it will effectively double duration to have them stacked on there. If the stack doesn't get used, if the enemy dies, that's those status effects that were not applied via sea snares should be spread among nearby enemies. So suddenly, that enemy with the 11 viral procs I was talking about earlier, all of a sudden that extra viral proc gets applied to everyone in the vicinity. And you don't have to really waste much time to do more procs. And the idea is to have this be some variation on Serene Spores, except instead of damage, you have some utility. And this would also work for the Liches and the Sisters. They have the four proc cap for each and every proc. And it should be really helpful to not have to switch to a weapon that applies the status. Or even you can change your arsenal to have one weapon slot be dedicated to applying status. I think that's a consequence that is good for the game overall, and it also gives you more of a reason to use single target weapons. As for Merulina, I think that the quickest fix possible that DE could ever deploy for Merulina is let us crouch to keep our normal Warframe collisions and friction. Like that's it. I can just hold crouch and I can go through the vents and stuff. And I also think that like yeah, it's Yareli. Lore-wise, she is the progenitor of everything K-Drive. I think it would make sense. I think it would be realistic within the lore for Yareli to be able to use primary weapons while she is riding Merulina. And now Aquablades, this is a bit of a wild change I've written down here. On hit, add a stack of whichever status effects are on the enemy. I think this would even apply to the Aquablades themselves, so it applies the guaranteed slash proc. But if it hits again, it will apply a slash proc and then another slash proc as a bonus. So you go from 1 to 3 to 5 to 7 to 9. Or instead of having a weapon just rapid fire a lot of slash procs, you can also have Yareli be there to add even more slash procs, even more of whatever else you're procking. And if not that, just let us throw the damn things so we can have like more damage or whatever. And I think that's just going to be way more fun than this boring spinning ring that we have at the moment. And finally, the change I want to be made to Riptide is that every enemy that is affected by sea snares should be pulled into the hitbox. Like, I don't care if you have to no clip them, if you have to teleport them, they should be pulled in. And every stored status effect, or even every status effect that is in every enemy that is affected by Riptide, it should like spread to every enemy that is caught by Riptide. Because my thought process when I was writing this is that Yareli uses water, and water is the universal solvent, so maybe this makes sense. And maybe you can also have the Riptide linger for a bit, like maybe 5, 8, 10 seconds, and that would let you add even more status, deal even more damage. And I think that would just be a fun time. All right then, that's everything I had to say about Yareli. Damn it. It was a half-hour video. I didn't even realize it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to really edit this thing down. Anyways, thank you for watching. I'm not going to ask you to subscribe because Warframe is not going to be a mainstay of my channel. In fact, the next video is going to be an SNT video because I have my reasons. So I'll see you then, or maybe I won't see you then. It's really your choice.